Hello and welcome back. In our past video, we have seen how you can use notebooks in order to trigger other notebooks. So if you have not seen that video, I would recommend you to watch that video first before starting with this one. Now, with Databricks, we get a very good functionality called workflows. You can use workflows in order to schedule or orchestrate or trigger your data processing jobs. Now, a job can be considered as a pipeline of tasks that you design in order to process your data. So today we are going to design our first workflow. We are going to understand how you can pass values from one task to another. We are going to see conditional operators such as if else. We are going to use the for each loop, which is the new addition to workflows. Now, before we begin, if you have not seen our previous videos, I would recommend you to go back and watch them first. So without any delay, let's begin. I am in my Databricks workspace. Today we are going to create a simple job. It is the same job that we created when we have seen that notebook job example. So we are going to process different department data in different tables, but with a twist. First, we are going to determine when we are running job, which day is it? Is it Sunday, Monday, Tuesday? And next we are going to check whether the day is Sunday. If the day is Sunday, then only we are going to process the data. Else we are not going to process anything. So the job is pretty simple. First, we are going to determine the day from the date, and then we are going to check whether the day is Sunday. If the day is Sunday, then we are going to process the data for different departments in different tables. If not, then we are going to process nothing. Now, in this simple job, we are going to pass values from one task to another task using dbutil utilities. Now, before we can begin creating this job, let's understand the UI of the workflow. So, in order to create a job, first you need to click on Create Job. Once you are inside the Create Job, first thing that you need to do is you have to give a name for that particular job. Okay, now we know that the job is a pipeline of tasks. So you can create any number of tasks into a job. Okay, so the first thing that you see is an unnamed task. So here you can go ahead and create a task. Let me just scroll it up. So the first thing that you see is a task name and then the type of the task. So Databricks provides you a lot of option for the tasks. So you can either use a Python script, a wheel file, a SQL, or you can run a DLT pipeline, DBT, Spark submit, run job, if else condition, or for each. Okay, so there are so many options available for each of the tasks that you create. Okay, next is the source. Either you are going to use the artifacts from your existing workspace, or you can configure a Git as well in order to process your scripts from the Git, right? And next is the path from where you are going to provide the source code. So if our option is notebook, we have to go ahead and select a notebook here. Now, if you remember when we are discussing about clusters, here you can go ahead and create a job cluster. So if you click on this pencil button, you get an option to create a job cluster from here. Now, the benefit of job cluster is it will automatically get terminated when your job gets succeed or it fails. So you can go ahead and configure your job cluster from this UI. For now, I'll just click on cancel. Now, once that is done, you get a lot of other options such as dependent library, parameters that you have to pass. Now, in order to get the parameters in a notebook, we know that we can use widgets and we have already seen it. So once you configure widgets, you can go ahead and pass the values for those widgets from this parameter tab from here. For now, we'll not configure these things, and the rest are the notifications. If you want to send a failure or a success notification, you can go ahead and configure it here, and you can set the number of retries from here. For example, if your job fails, it will keep on retrying for the number of time you can set here. Now, last option is duration threshold. If you click on this add, you get option. So if your job is running for a particular time, you can set up the warning or the timeout. Now, once you set a timeout, the job will get killed if it surpasses the timeout. For example, in a job, if you set the timeout as 2 hours and your job keeps on running after 2 hours, job will automatically get killed once the timeout limit is hit. Okay. Now, on the right hand side, you get more options like the creator, and we are going to see this later in our course when we go ahead and change permissions. The next important is the schedule and trigger. You can go ahead and configure triggers in order to schedule your job from this portion, right? And if you want to pass parameters at the job level, not on the task level. So if you see on the left hand side, these parameters are at the task level, but you can configure some parameters which will be job level. It means all these parameters will by default be supplied to all the tasks that you configured within the same job. Okay. So this is job level parameters that you can configure from on the right hand side. Right. Similarly, job level notifications can be set from here, and the duration threshold. Now, all of this information were present on the left hand side, which were at the task level. On the right hand side, you get all of them at the job level. Similarly, the permissions is on the bottom. So you can see who is the owner, who all can manage, and who all can even see this job, or who all can run this job. So all these permissions can be set up from this portion on the right hand side. Now, another important information that you see here in the bottom is advanced settings. So once I click on this, I scroll down, you see the queue. You can go ahead and turn on or turn off queue for that particular job. It means if the resource is not available for the job to run, the job will be waiting for the resource for next 48 hours. If in that case, if you turn off queue, if the resource is not available, the job will immediately fail. Similarly, you can go ahead and set max concurrent runs. It means how many parallel runs this job can happen. So if you give different parameters for this jobs, for different values, you can run it multiple times for the same job, right? For now, let it be the default, which is 1. Now that we have understood the different options available in the UI for the job, let's go ahead and create our simple job in order to understand it better. Now, in order to create our sample job that we were discussing, process data EMP by department, we need some notebooks. So we are going to create few notebooks and through which we are going to run this job. Okay. So first what we'll do is we'll go back to the workspace and I'll discard this change for now. What I've done is I've created a workflow folder here. So you can see I've already created a folder called process EMP data by department. So this would be the job that we are going to create. Okay. Now inside this folder, I have created the first notebook that is required to determine the day. Okay. So first let's create all the notebooks. Then we are going to write the code. Okay. So the first notebook is to get the day for which the job will run. Okay. Then we will check using if else. If the day is Sunday, then we are going to process the data. Okay. Now to process the data, we are going to use the same notebook that we created for our notebook job. So for that, I'll go back to workspace. I'll go to notebooks and I'll use the same notebook that we created, which is write EMP data. So I'll click on this 3 dots on the right hand side. I'll click on clone and now I'll just change the name. Okay. So I'll make it 02, which would be the second step for the notebooks. And I'm going to change the location. So I'm going to click on browse to the parent folder back. I'm going to select workflows under process EMP data. I'm clone it here. Okay. Now if you see the notebook is cloned here. Okay. Now we are going to create a third notebook. In case the day is not Sunday, we are just going to print the value for the day there. Okay. So that would be the false condition. So I'm going to click on create and I'm going to create a notebook called. Okay. For now, I'll keep it blank. Now I'll go back to workspace. I'll go to workflows. Now, if you see, we have all the 3 notebooks created. Okay. Now, first I'm going to write the code to get the day from the date as an input. Okay. So I'm going to open this notebook now. Now, in order to pass a parameter inside a notebook, we generally use widgets. And we also know that because we have already created widgets in our previous videos, right? So we are going to first create the cluster that we need in order to test this notebook. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click connect and I'm going to select the ease with data cluster and I'm going to start and attach. Okay. Meanwhile, this cluster is starting. Let's write the code in order to create our widget. So create a date, input date. I'm going to create a widget. To create a widget, we use dbutils dot widget dot text and the name of the widget would be input date. Okay. And the default value would be blank. Okay. So this would be the input date based on which we are going to process the day. Okay. And this input date will be in this ISO format. Okay. Which is YYYYMMDD and then hours, minutes and seconds. You can see the ISO format mentioned here. Okay. Next, we are going to read the value from this widget. So we know in order to read the value, we use dbutils dot widgets dot get and the name of the parameter, right, which is input date. Okay. Now we are going to hold this in a variable. So I'll use input date as a variable. Okay. Now next we are going to write a code in order to get the day out of this date. Okay. And we are going to use the time parser policy as legacy because this is Spark greater than 3 and we are going to set it to legacy so that we can use the existing datetime patterns. Now, if you want to know more about datetime patterns, you can always go to this website of Spark. I'll put the link in the description of the video. You can go ahead and check out this website to understand which all symbols you can use for designing your datetime. Okay. Now, we have already seen designing datetimes in our PySpark playlist. You can check out this video here. Now, since we already have our input date here, let's print it out. So I'll just write print input date so that we can see what is the date that we got from the widget. Okay. So next we are going to use Spark SQL in order to get the day out of this timestamp value. Okay. But I don't need this now because I'm going to use Spark SQL. Now we need input day in this variable. So I'll write input day. Okay. And I'm going to use Spark SQL. So I write Spark SQL. Okay. And I'll use triple quotes so that I can write multi-line command. Okay. And I'm going to use F in order to pass in the input date. Okay. So now let's write our command. So I'll write select and we are going to convert this date, whatever we are getting from the widget, to timestamp, right? So first I'll change it to timestamp, right? And I have to pass the date in the single quotes, right? and this is the name of the variable, which is input date, right? And next we know the format from here. This is the ISO format, so I'll just copy this and I'll pass it here. Okay, so this will convert this string into timestamp. Okay, next we are going to find out the day. So in order to do that, we'll use date format. So I'll write date format, and we need to find out the day, right? So we can just go back to the date time pattern, and if I scroll down, you can see e would be used for day of the week, right? So let me just go back, and I'm going to use e for this. Okay, so this is done. Let's go ahead and write collect, because I need to get it in Python format, right? So I'll use collect. Let's go ahead and print this. So I'll write print underscore input day, right? So this is done. Let's go ahead and validate this. So I'll first run this cell. Awesome. As soon as I do that, you can see the widget created at the top, right? Let's go ahead and copy this day from here and paste it here. And I'll hit enter. Okay. Let me just run the second cell now. Now you can see we have read the date from the widget. Let me just run the third cell, which will process the day. So we are getting an error called illegal pattern as T, because we have a T in between. Now, in order to fix this, let's go ahead and put this in double quote, and we are going to put T in single quote. Okay, let me rerun this now. Awesome. You can see this is Sunday here, right? So we are getting the value, but we need to extract only Sunday, right? So what we are going to do is I'm going to use 0 for the array, 0 again for the array. Okay, so let me just rerun this. So now you see the value for the input day is Sunday. Awesome. We got the value, right? Now we need to pass out this value to the different task in the job, right? For that, we are going to use another utility of dbutils called dbutils job. Okay, so I'm going to write dbutils dot jobs dot task values. Okay, and we are going to write input day. So we are going to pass out input day to different tasks with this name. Okay, input day, and we are going to pass out that value called input day. Okay, my bad. We just need to put here set. Okay, I just forgot set. So we need to set the value, right? For this value, we need to set input day. So we need to put dot set here. Okay, now that we are done with this notebook, I'll just go back, and we are not going to change any code for this write emp data. Okay, this is the same notebook that we have used for our notebook job. It takes input as department, and for that department, it is going to write the data in different tables in dev bronze schema. Okay, so whatever department is passed, it will create a table with called department underscore that department name, and it is going to extract all the employees for that department there. Okay, so I'm not going to explain this notebook. If you want to see, just go ahead and check out this video. Let's go back to workspace, and now we are going to write the condition if the condition is not satisfied. It means if the day is not Sunday, then we are going to post the else condition. Means we are going to just print the day what we got from our first task. Okay, and here we are going to use the same task values. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll write underscore day equals to dbutils dot jobs dot task values dot get. Now we have to get the value, right? The first thing is the task key, from which task we are getting, right? So we are getting it from the task called 01. It will be the name of the task. Okay, so we are going to create the task with this name only. Okay, task set day. This would be the name of the task that we set, where we are going to run our first notebook. Okay, and next is the value. The value was input date, and now we are going to print this. So I'll write print underscore d. Okay, so we are going to print the day that we get from our first notebook, which will be run by this task. We'll name the task as 01 set day. Okay, so I'll copy this now. Now I'll go back to workspace in the workflows in the job, and now all three of our notebook is ready. Okay, let's go ahead and create our workflow now. So I'm back in my workflows. Now we are going to create our job. So I'll just go ahead and click on create job, and I'm gonna name this job. Okay, now our first task would be 01 set day. This is the task from which we are going to set the day. Okay, so I've named the task accordingly that we have already set in our third notebook. Okay, and now the input for our this task is notebook, and that is again in our workspace, that is not in Git. Okay, now I'm going to select that notebook. So I'll click on this. I'll go to ease with data, and inside workflows, I'm going to use the process emp data, and I'm going to use the first notebook that we created. Okay, Now you can go ahead and create job clusters. But for now, I'm going to use the all-purpose cluster that is already running, which is ease with data, so that we don't have to wait for the job cluster to get up and running and we can go ahead and process this quickly. Okay. So I'm going to use the same all-purpose cluster. Now, if I scroll down, we need to provide the input parameter, right? Our input parameter for this notebook was input date, right? So I need to provide it here. So I'll write input date. Okay. Now, either I can provide manual values or we can go ahead and use dynamic values from the jobs. So I'll click on this and I'm going to select the start date time for this job. So this is the dynamic time. Whenever this job starts, it will pass in ISO date time into this input date parameter, which will be read by this tasks widget. And we are going to process this accordingly. Okay. So let it be just like this. And if I scroll down, so I'm not going to set task level notification retry and duration threshold. Okay. Now I'm going to click on create task. Awesome. Our first task is ready, right? Now we need to check whether the value is Sunday or not. So for that, I'm going to create one new task. So I'll click on add task and I'm going to use if else condition. Okay. So I'll write check day. Okay. Now, what is the condition? This would be the output of the task value of the previous task, right? So I'm going to select on this dynamic value. I'm going to scroll down and you can see task 01 values, right? You can get a lot of options here, error code, execution count, but I'm going to use values because this would be the value. Okay. So what was the value? The value was input day, right? This was the value that we are sending out. Now, this value needs to be equals to Sunday. So I'll write SUN. Okay. And I can select different operators from here, but I need to select equal. So I'm going to select equals. Now, it depends on the first task. Okay. So the first task should successfully run. So it says all succeeded. You can even select different options. None failed, at least one succeeded. But I need to have the first task succeeded. So I'll just click on all succeeded and I'll click on create task. Awesome. Both of our tasks are ready, right? The next task that we need to add is to process the data. So I'll just go ahead and click on add task. I'm going to again select notebook and I'm going to write 02 process data, right? And I'm going to use this notebook to process the data, which is write emp data. I'm going to click on confirm. Again, it will use the same cluster. It has to see whether the checked condition is true. Means if it is Sunday, then the true condition would go to process data, right? You can go ahead and change this as well. So you can go ahead and select false or you can go ahead and select from the first task. So dependency, you can go ahead and select from this particular tab. Okay. So if all succeeded, now parameter that we need to pass. So I'm going to click on add. I'll write dpt and we can pass in values. So let me just put sales for now. Okay. And I'm not going to set notification retries and duration threshold and I'll click on create. Okay. This is done. Now let me just go ahead and add false task as well. Okay. So I'm going to click on add task. Again, I'm going to select notebook and this time I'm going to use 03 else condition. Okay. And I'm going to use the notebook, which is else condition. And now I'm going to change depends on. So I'm going to click on this. It should be the false condition from check day, right? So I'm going to select this. Now this is done. I'll click on create task. Awesome. Our pipeline is ready. So the first task would set in the day. The second would check whether it is Sunday or not. And if it is Sunday, we are going to process data. If it is not Sunday, then we are going to just print the day. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on run now. Now that I have done it, so you can see a message here called triggered. You can go to runs on the tab here and you can see the job running here. Okay. So if I click on the start time now, you're going to see the whole pipeline and the job status from here. Awesome. Now you can see the pipeline and you can see the first job is running. You can go ahead and click on this job in order to see the status for each of the sale in the notebook. Now you can see the status changed to succeeded. So if I scroll down, you can see here the value is Friday. Okay. And if I scroll on the right hand side at the bottom, you can see the task value. It says input day is Friday, right? So you can also see the task value for each of the task here in the run. Okay. Let me just go back to the workflow again. And if I click on this, you can see else condition, the job has failed. Okay. Now here on the second condition, you can see since it was Friday, it has gone to the false condition and the third particular notebook has failed. Let's go ahead and click on this and you can see input date were not found. So in this case, we have an error here. Okay. Now let me go ahead and fix this notebook. So what I'll do is I'll go back to workspace. I'll go to workflows. I'll go to process data and I'll go to the third notebook. So our mistake was it was input day, not date, right? So I'll just going to change this to input day. Okay. Now our notebook is changed. I'll go back to our workflow and to our workflows. So you can see it has failed, right? So I'll just expand this again. Now, I don't need to run all of them. I can go ahead and run the selected one which are failed. So I'll click on this repair run. I'll select the one that has failed. I'll use the same condition. I'll not change anything, and I'll just click on repair run. So now it is going to use the same value and it is going to run only the one that has failed. And this is how you can rerun your failed pipeline. Awesome. Now you can see it has just succeeded. So if I expand this, you can see the value has Friday here, right? So now you know how you can go ahead and rerun your failed pipelines. You can go ahead and click on repair tasks and go ahead and select all of them that you need to run. So if I select on this, if I go ahead and click on this 3, so it is going to rerun all of this 3. And this is how you can go ahead and rerun your pipelines if you want. You don't need to rerun all the steps, but only the required ones if you need. So I'm going to click on cancel now. And now that our pipeline has succeeded, but with else condition, let's go ahead and override the value in order to rerun this pipeline and process the data. Okay, so I'll go back to the job again. And now I'll run this with a manual parameter. And in order to do that, you can go ahead and click on this drop down and you can click on run with different parameters. Now you can go ahead and pass in a different parameter if you wish. So I'm going to change this value and I'm going to pass a manual parameter. So what I'll do is I'll pass a day, which is Sunday. So I'll pass 10:27 and P, and I'll pass a time, say 13:00:00. So this is 27th October 2024, which is supposed to be Sunday. Okay, so let me just go ahead and click on run now. Now if you see, it has already started running. Now we can also check the status of workflows from workflow. And if I click on job runs, you can go ahead and see it from here as well. Okay, so this is running. Let's go ahead and expand this. Now, if you see, it has gone to true and to the first one, which is saying process data. It means now it is processing the data. So if I click on this second, you can see Sunday is equals to Sunday because the day that we passed was Sunday. And this is why this condition is true now. So let me just go back to run and you can see it is processing data now. So if I expand this, you can see this particular task is running now, right? So this is how you can go ahead and override a value if you need it. And our job succeeded just now. So this has completed successfully. And now you know how you can use conditional flow in order to process your job. Okay. Now we are going to change one more thing. For this process data, we have data for different departments. For now, we have forced the value to sales, right? So if I scroll down here in the parameters, you can see department is sales. Okay. So we have forced the values for sales. Let's go ahead and run it for different parameters using for each loop. To do that, I'll go back to jobs. I'll click on this process EMP data. I'll go to tasks and now I'll edit this process data task. Now to do that, I'll click on this loop over task. And as soon as I do that, you can see it has already created a for each loop. If I expand this, you can see a cyclic symbol. It means this will be run for the parameters that you provide in this array. Okay. So I'm going to do it for 2 departments. So I'm going to write the first department as sales and second department as office. Okay. So we need to provide a comma here. Okay, so what it is going to do is it is going to pass one by one the value inside this task. And now we need to capture the task inside this notebook, right? So I'm going to click on this notebook. I'm going to scroll down and the department parameter, we are going to capture the value from the for each loop. For that, I'm going to click on this and I'm going to select input. Okay, input would be the input from the for each loop. So every time this for each loop runs, it will pass in one value inside this task. Okay, and that would be captured using input and would be passed inside this notebook using department. Okay, now this is ready. Our for each loop is also ready. So this is how you can design for each loop. You can even use dynamic values in order to pass in inputs for this for each. Okay, so this is a for each task. Inside this, we have taken a notebook task and we are passing the value from for each using department. So this is ready. I'll just click on save on task. Okay, so our pipeline is ready again. This time when it succeeds, it will run for 2 of the departments, which is sales and office. Let's go ahead and run it again for 27th October, which is Sunday. So I'm going to click on this, run with different parameters. I'm going to change the input date now. I'm going to use 2024 and 10 and 27. Again, for ISO format. 13, you can use any timestamp. Timestamp doesn't matter. What matters is date. Okay, I'm going to click on run. Awesome, it started running. Let's go back to the runs. Click on the start time and you can see the job started running. Okay, you can see the value is true. And if I click on this, it is running the for each loop. If I scroll down, you can see it is running for sales now. The input is sales. Okay, similarly, for the next iteration, it would run for office. So I'll wait here while this is running and I'll come back. Awesome. Now you can see it has succeeded for sales and now it is running for office. And this is how you can also configure for each loop in the workflows in Databricks. I hope you have learned a lot about workflows today. From our next video, we are going to use workflows throughout. We are going to use workflows to run DLT pipelines. We are going to use workflows to run notebooks and a lot of jobs. So you're going to learn a lot about workflows going forward. In our next video, we are going to look into autoloaders. Till then, keep learning, keep growing, and keep sharing.